Greetings and welcome to the Active Citizen course. Thank you for signing up for this session, and I do hope you will enjoy as we journey and understand what it means to be an active citizen. My name is Simphiwe Zuma. I am an accountant by profession and a speaker by passion. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Simphiwe based in South Africa. We are keynote speakers and trainers on active citizenship, the sustainable development goals, the future of work, and skills of the future. We are also MCs for different events. Personally, I'm an experienced trainer and facilitator, having done trainings for different entities and in particular Junior Chamber International, JCI, which is an organization of young active citizens. I'm also a strategy consultant, what I call sometimes a futurist. I am passionate about the future and what it holds for us, the role that technology plays in enabling us to be sustainable in the future, as well as passionate about equipping people with skills so that we can have a positive impact in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. I work with different entities in regards to these strategies, including private sector companies, government sector, as well as non-profit organizations. I am, most importantly, an active citizen myself. I work with different communities from a very small township in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, which is my hometown, as well as currently being based in Johannesburg, do a lot of work through the organization I serve, Junior Chamber International, JCI, where we do work with different communities in and around Johannesburg. I look forward to presenting this session with you, and I hope that together we will learn and grow and impact our communities. The objective of this course is for us to be able to understand what is an active citizen. We will then go on to understand the Sustainable Development Goals, which are also known as the SDGs. Once that foundation has been laid, we will then go on to equip ourselves with the tools to create sustainable community projects aligned to the SDGs. Hope you're looking forward to this session. Part 1. Active Citizenship. What is active citizenship? Now, this term, many people have tried to define it, but what we find is we don't really have one specific answer to what active citizenship is. And today, I'll firstly start off by looking at what other organizations and other people have said when they were trying to define active citizenship. Active citizenship is an ambiguous term. There is not a clear and unique definition. The most used one depicts the active citizenship as the taking of consciousness by a normal citizen who does not have any governing role of his or her importance into the society. In few words, a citizen who takes responsibilities towards the society and the environment is an active citizen. Note, and I believe this comes through in the last sentence where they highlight someone who takes responsibility towards the society and the environment. This is one definition of active citizenship. Another looked at it and said, it is participation in civil society, community, and or political life, characterized by mutual respect and non-violence, and in accordance with human rights and democracy. So in this case, they were looking at the active citizenship as one where active citizens would show mutual respect and would act in a way that there is no violence, but ultimately we would be making decisions that have taken into consideration everyone's input. So it requires the participation, whether you're participating in civil society or you're participating in your community or you're participating as a politician for that matter, as long as you're acting in a way that shows a mutual respect and non-violence, and that whatever we're doing takes into account human rights and applies democracy. Another definition said, active citizenship is defined as both a right and responsibility of citizens to participate in the political, economic, social, and cultural life of the nation, ensuring that they are well informed and that their voice is reflected in decision-making that affects their livelihood and rights. This one is more comprehensive, taking into account that as active citizens, you're not only limited to your community or to a specific political party, but you're actually an all-rounder, someone who takes action or participates and gets involved in whether it's economic, cultural, or anything that concerns your nation. And you are well informed and also ensuring that your voice is heard in the decision making. I also particularly appreciate that an active citizenship is both a right and a responsibility. So with all the actions and participation activities that you do, you are taking into consideration the fact that there is a responsibility that you have to participate, but you also have a right as a citizen to participate. And then another, I'll just focus on the first bullet point, which defines active citizenship as, in fact, they firstly acknowledge that it varies, but it is an individual who gets involved in public life and affairs at a local, national, and international level. Now, when we look at all these descriptions or definitions, the key element that comes through is, in fact, found in the word active. Because when you're active, you're not passive. You're not just letting things go on without your involvement. So the one important or word to highlight in this entire space of active citizenship is you, as an active citizen, you are one who participates. So they've all looked at it from different angles, but the one thing that comes through is that you are participating in your society, your community, and if you choose to participate in political life, you participate in political life or economically, or get involved culturally. But what is also important to note is that in all these things, you are ensuring that the well-being of your society is taken care of. The well-being of the environment is taken care of. You are being a responsible person when it comes to your society and ultimately the world at large. I like how the last one even speaks about your involvement at a local, national, and international level. So the takeaway from what is active citizenship It is about participation and ensuring the well-being at a local, national, and international level. Now, who is an active citizen? How do we identify active citizens? We've spoken about active citizenship being about taking action or about participating. But what then makes a person an active citizen? I'd like to take a moment and allow us to just think of our communities. You can think of it at a local or national or even international level. What comes to mind, or who comes to mind, when you think of an active citizen? And perhaps also think to yourself, why do you think that that person would be defined as an active citizen? I would like to take a moment and share a story of where I've seen active citizens in the area where I grew up. So I come from a township in a place called KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Now, in our township, we are faced with different, I'd say, opportunities. Some people have a lot and they've got exposure to businesses, or they've been schooled and they can get jobs and or start their own businesses. But others in the very same community do not have enough. Some come from child-headed households because they've lost their parents. What I then started seeing as young as primary school days, where the church I go to at home would have what is called the Good Samaritan giveaways, where those that were less fortunate would then get food packages that were done for them. So a group of members within the church, without the leaders of the church getting involved, realized that as we sat as a congregation, there were different people who we all came from different circumstances. And those group of people then thought, let us do something so that these people that are part of our community can also sleep with food in their tummies. And that was a start of something that has carried on for almost 20 years today. We have even grown and gotten involved where companies and small businesses are now getting involved in order to make sure that this Good Samaritan basket has enough to be able to feed those that cannot feed themselves. How did we get here? There were people who chose to take action. Active citizens are people who choose to take action. They look at where they are and they decide, how can I act so that where I am becomes a different place. And you can think of different people where you come from, where you have seen what they've touched or whatever action they've taken has had a positive impact in the surroundings, be it at a local, national, or even international level. Another example that we can make in South Africa is that of Nelson Mandela and those that took part in fighting apartheid back in the late 90s, or in fact for a number of decades, but particularly leading us to what is now known as the Free South Africa. So in different countries, we've also had different people take action and really standing up so that there is a difference in the communities that they live in. We can speak of Mahalia, who was passionate about the education of women, and today it has transformed the lives of the women in her community just by taking action and standing up for herself. There are a number of examples also in different parts of the world that we can think of, and maybe even yourself. You have found yourselves in a community or in a place where you've needed or you've identified that there was a problem, and you then rose up to say, I can make a difference. And that makes you an active citizen. Part 2. Sustainable Development Goals. We will now look at the Sustainable Development Goals. In September 2015, 193 leaders from different countries came together and established what is now called the Sustainable Development Goals. What brought about these goals were a number of consultations, research that was done with different communities around the world in order to come up with a set of goals that would take us from the year 2015 up until the year 2030. The purpose was for us to create a better world than what we found ourselves in 2015. The Sustainable Development Goals are a call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by the year 2030. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. We will now go into each of these SDGs, understand what they are all about, and also look at how we as active citizens can contribute to ensuring that we get closer, at least by the year 2030, to these goals. We will now look at the SDGs individually. The first goal is no poverty. The aim here is to eradicate all forms of poverty by the year 2030. Today, we've got over 700 million people who live in poverty worldwide. This translates to at least 80% of people surviving on just $1.90 per person per day in each family. The reality is poverty affects communities all over the world, including communities where you and I live. We may not perhaps be affected directly, but we certainly do know people who are. Now, the conversation today is about being active citizens who ultimately bring forth solutions to our communities. And therefore, when we look at these Sustainable Development Goals, the question that we ask is, where can we get involved? Where can we find places so that we can help? And in terms of looking at the no poverty goal, some of the areas that one can look at is, firstly, identifying where are these communities that need our help. Once we have identified, we can then look at the resources that we have. This speaks to engaging, firstly, with those close to us, or even getting involved with other organizations that help in the different communities. Some of examples of projects that are being done around the world focus a lot on agriculture, where different schools, for example, do garden projects, and the food that is planted not only feeds the children from the communities that are faced with high poverty, but they also get an opportunity to sell the fruits and vegetables to people so that they can raise funds. In turn, not only are these schools in the community only doing the garden projects, this also goes out to educating the parents, for example, so that they can also start doing their own food gardens, where we can then supply food for the family as well as be able to sell forward. Not only can you get involved with regards to SDG 1, by assisting with the community with perhaps the food project or any other project, you can also directly purchase the food that is grown by these individuals. Some of the things that we can deliberately do, for example, instead of buying your fruits and veg at your typical grocery store, start identifying where you can find people who are growing food and selling at the corners of the street, for example. The pennies or the amount of dollars or rands that you may be using at your local supermarket can make a huge difference to a person who has grown their veggies just in order for them to survive. We will then look at goal number 2, closely related to goal number 1, which is no poverty. Goal number 2 looks at eradicating hunger. It talks to zero hunger. When we look at the world today, nearly 800 million people are suffering from hunger worldwide. There's so much that still needs to be done. And one of the areas that hunger directly affects is agriculture. It is rather unfortunate that today we find ourselves also with climate change, which has had a dire impact on plants as well as animals because of droughts or severe climate changes that plants and animals cannot survive. What is of utmost importance in the area of us getting to zero hunger is the sustainability of agriculture. And faced with the challenges of climate change, as mentioned, the industry in agriculture has now had to find ways to be more innovative, to use technology, and also the requirement of government support and private sector support in order for them to be able to grow the food that is required, and also assist in educating particularly subsistence farmers and farmers that want to start selling on a greater scale. So some of these, particularly if you look at yourself and think, well, I'm not a farmer, I'm not quite sure how I could get involved. Similar to the example given with regards to no poverty, you and I can make a difference where we are by identifying the communities we are in and also trying our best to assist. The food garden projects have been a great success in many parts of the world, urban or rural areas. It is about identifying the land perhaps that can be used, and then working together with the community to assist them to plant and grow their own food. These are just some of the examples, but you together with family members or even other community members and other organizations can then sit together and identify what else can be done. I just know in my community back home, they've started chicken farming, where not only do they keep the chickens for the sole purpose of reproduction, but they've also then keeping the chickens so that they can have eggs that are resold into the market, and also they grow the chickens so that the chickens can also be sold as well. So there are just a number of ways that one can start identifying skills that they can use in order to ensure that they're growing food and that there's access also to nutritious food and opportunities. We will now look at Global Goal 3, which speaks to good health and well-being. Good health and well-being is all our responsibilities. It talks about the end of epidemics such as HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and other communicable diseases. The hope is that by the year 2030, we find ourselves at a place where there is equitable access to healthcare services to all men and women. How can we get involved? Perhaps we can look at ourselves and say, well, I'm not an expert at research, nor am I a healthcare giver. But we in our communities can also make a difference. There is nothing more powerful than educating people. Educating is not only about formal education, but it is about sharing knowledge. So particularly when it comes to diseases and so forth, some of the things just require people knowing what precaution to take in order to avoid themselves getting close to the disease, and also being educated about how to take care of themselves when they are ill, so that they do not spread the disease further and they are able to take care of themselves up until the point that they get better. So we can get involved in our communities by either doing school visits where we educate, or visit community centers where people are gathered in numbers, where we can get an opportunity to then educate and make a difference. Other areas, particularly when it comes to well-being, it's about lifestyle. So this speaks to the type of food we eat, as well as exercising just to keep well. This also means as active citizens, we can get involved with doing, for example, community sports, where we gather people and allow them hosting a sports day, or hosting a race, or a fun walk, anything that will enable people to be active and take care of themselves. So being active citizens, where the fourth step that talks about taking action, it's just about taking a moment, reflecting about where you are in your community, and then identifying an opportunity that can make a difference. It doesn't need to be expensive, it doesn't need to be complicated, as long as it has a direct positive impact on the community. The fourth goal speaks to quality education. Now, education is something that can empower not only one person, but it can have a positive impact on the individual's family, and ultimately the individual's community. In fact, this is the one goal that has direct impact on all the other goals, because through education, a person can understand and read and be able to identify opportunities for example, for good health and well-being. You can share flyers or information, and they can get educated even without you being physically present where they are. In terms of good health, they can get to understand what that means when you talk about nutrition, as well as quality education bridges the gap between inequality, and ultimately can move a person from poverty to a place where they can get exposure and get better jobs, and be in a position to take care of themselves financially. Education provides inclusive and this goal in particular enables one to provide inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities. So with this goal, how can you as an individual get involved? How can you as an active citizen create a sustainable impact in this sustainable goal? We can, for example, go out and tutor in communities that are previously disadvantaged. So in communities where they do not have access to quality education, they don't have access to textbooks or teachers, We can offer ourselves as tutors, where we go in and support the work that is being done at those schools. We can also offer our services, for example, for adult learning, where we've got communities where adults have not yet been exposed to education, or who are illiterate, where we then start enabling them and laying the foundation in order for them to be able to just do the basics in terms of reading. Some communities, particularly in South Africa, we find that there is a high number of young people that are not able to read. So it means that the foundation, when it comes to reading, needs everyone to get involved. And we can get involved as active citizens by visiting the schools in disadvantaged communities, and we offer a Saturday reading group. We lay the foundation, we support up until students are in a position to sustain themselves and read on their own. One of the things that needs to be introduced and actively also done in our communities is coding. We all understand that technology plays quite a significant role in the development of today, particularly in developing countries, as those are the areas where there's still a lot of growth that is expected. It is then an opportunity where if you do have the skill, you can impart it to those that will take longer to be exposed to such opportunities. We will now look at SDG 5, which speaks about gender equality. This particular goal is aimed at achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. It's about providing women and girls with equal access to education, healthcare, decent work, and representation in political and economic decision-making. It's important to note that gender equality should never be limited to just women and men. In fact, this goal speaks also to the end of discrimination against all genders and those that are not gender conforming. This particular SDG becomes quite an important one, particularly in our communities and workspaces where patriarchy seems to be constantly prevalent. It is important that we stand up and educate our communities, workplaces, and everywhere else where we see that women and those that do not conform to the normal gender specification, which are male and female, members of the LGBTQI+ community, where they are discriminated against. It is important to help those that become offensive to either women or to the members of the LGBTQI community, because sometimes it is the lack of exposure, or it is the foundation of how a person's being brought up that does not allow them to be accepting of others. And this is where we've got an opportunity to educate. Importantly, we also need to stand up against discrimination so that we don't facilitate or create an environment which is accepting of those that discriminate against others. These are just the small things that you can start identifying in your corner and start actively standing up against. There are other opportunities that we can get involved in, particularly with organizations that go out and actively promote, for example, equal opportunities in the workplaces for women, people who go out and ensure that the demographics take into account equal number of women and men in certain places, including workplaces and the political places. So these are just some of the things, and if you are in a position where you are a leader or you're in a place of influence, that you need to actively consider when making decisions. We will now move on to SDG 6, which speaks to clean water and sanitation. The aim of this goal is to ensure that there is equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all, ensuring that there is adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and to end open defecation. So we do know that there are communities where, particularly in rural areas or areas that are highly exposed to poverty, where they don't have access to safe drinking water, they don't have access to proper sanitation or just general hygiene, and even the dignity of the people is affected because there are no safe places or closed up places where a person can release themselves. This goal aims to ensure that by 2030 the picture is different, where people have access to safe drinking water which is affordable, and they also have safe places and adequate sanitation that is an environment where they also feel respected and represented. As active citizens, sometimes we look at these as perhaps expensive, or a government responsibility, or businesses to get involved. But this is actually an area where we as individuals can also get involved. In fact, just in your house, you can make a difference when it comes to this SDG. Firstly, by how you use water. Use water sparingly. Where you can recycle water, particularly, for example, water that you would have used for washing can also be used for flushing the toilet. If we've had rain, for example, ensure that you have a bucket that is collecting the rainwater and that can then be used for gardening. Also, just ensuring that when you're taking a bath or a shower, you take shorter showers and you use less water when you bath. So these are just small measures, but the impact that they have is enormous. We can also educate on the importance of hygiene. So this talks about going into communities where, for example, you find that there'll be a dripping tap, or there'll be water gushing down the streets, and sometimes it's ignorance or people not understanding the impact of what that has on the greater world. So this then gives us an opportunity to say, let us educate so that people can start doing better. Even educating around the importance of hygiene, because that has a direct impact on well-being. We can also assist with supporting a community to get access to clean water and sanitation. So these are projects that you can collaborate with others and ensure that perhaps we get like tanks where rainwater is collected and then it is reused for other things, for example, flushing the toilet, or other means that like watering the garden and so forth. So you can identify in the community that you're in how you can get involved in order to create a better environment for that community, and also start doing better even in your own household. Goal number 7 looks at affordable and clean energy. Here, the hope is that by 2030, we would ensure that all people have access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy. When we look at the world today, we've got at least more than 1.3 billion people who do not have access to electricity. And of that 1.3, 82% are found in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Some of the things that are being done around the world to address this is the introduction of solar power, where it is used to basically give us warm water as well as power some of our electric appliances. This is being applied not only in rural areas, but it's being found more and more in urban areas as we all start being conscious about our contribution to the well-being of the environment, and also just realizing how limited the resources we have are. Some countries such as Uganda have introduced waste to wealth initiatives, where they take bio-waste and basically recycle it in order to produce products that can be substituted for firewood or charcoal. This in turn again impacts the environment, because you then eliminate resources that are harmful to the environment, and you use biodegradable resources that are better for the environment. Goal 8 looks at decent work and economic growth. Now, why this goal is important is because when everyone gets an opportunity to do work that is productive and delivers a fair income, that is in a secure workspace, and allows them to have social protection for their family and better prospects for their personal development and social integration, it ultimately makes a person feel wholesome and feel like they are contributing to the well-being of the economy and society, but they in turn are receiving. Some of the things that are addressed, in fact, there is a relationship in these goals and in most goals, because the introduction of decent work and economic growth has a direct relation to the reduction of inequality and people feeling that they are members of society that can contribute effectively. This goal also aims to at least have 7% of gross domestic product growth per annum in the least developed countries. So some of the areas where that it has been identified rather that people of society do not have access to decent work, they're working for below the minimum wage or even living in poverty, are found in most of the developing countries, and the aim is to then get to the year 2030 and start realizing at least 7% of the gross domestic product growth per annum coming in through this goal. How we can contribute as individuals is basically to educate people about the goals, and secondly to enable or empower people with skills so that they can go out and contribute and start seeking jobs that allow them, that are more of decent work. So some of the things that we can look at, for example, is empowering people with technological skills, because we know that today the world is moving into that space where people need to understand and be able to navigate and use technology. And these skills then ultimately enable them to secure jobs or be productive and in their workspaces. Goal 9 looks at industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Here it is about building resilient infrastructure, promoting sustainable industrialization, and fostering innovation. It's about investing in new resilient infrastructure in particularly developing countries. So most of us, if you are from an African country, you will understand that we are faced with challenges when it comes to infrastructure that we need to navigate. For example, if we look at the conversation that has taken place for a number of years, where we talk about Africa trading with Africa, one of the things that discourages the ability for us to trade with one another is poor infrastructure. So for goods to get from one country to the next, by the time they would get there, there's been so many delays and so many issues because of poor infrastructure. So when the aim is to build resilient infrastructure, it enables for efficiency of production, it enables for efficiency of movement of things, and ultimately the efficiency of the country and of the continent and the world at large. So this goal is also about the expansion of geographic reach of research and development facilities, which will bring R&D capability to developing countries. So investing in Goal 9 will enable researchers to contribute to innovation and infrastructure development, particularly in developing countries. When it comes to the more technical goals, such as SDG 9, sometimes we cannot as individuals directly impact, but one of the things that we can contribute to is learning to understand what it means and then educating our fellow members, so that we are finding ourselves at a place where we've got people who want to contribute to the research and development space, or people who want to be engineers, so that the countries that we live in start seeing the improvement in infrastructure. Goal 10 looks at reduction of inequality. Now, when we talk about inequality, it is not only about the economic gap, but it is about reducing inequality that may be based on age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, economic or any other status within a country. So you'll find that there are a number of things that can separate us as humanity. And in order to influence and make sure that we are getting to a place where there is a reduction in inequality, one of the things as active citizens we can do is actually understand what our leaders are promising, or the policies and that are being developed. And then we actively participate by voting, because as much as we've got rights, we've also got a responsibility to ensure that we put in power people that enable the country that we live in, or the world that we live in, to be in a place where we see ourselves as equal people, both in terms of income as well as in all other areas, be it age, race, sex, or ability or disability. So the power that we have as active citizens is to use our vote to speak on our behalf. Goal 11 is about sustainable cities and communities. It's about ensuring access for all to adequate and safe, affordable housing and basic services, and the upgrading of the slums. So if we look at the places that we live in today, in Johannesburg, South Africa, we've got a place called Sandton, which is can be seen to be rather luxurious, comfortable, good infrastructure, but literally a stone throw away we find a place called Alex, which is basically a place that would be described mostly as slums. So what we want to see by the year 2030 is the upgrading of Alex so that it is an environment that is sustainable and a community that is safe and basically accessible and easy to navigate, similar to what you would find in areas such as Sandton. So the goal here is to provide access to safe, affordable, accessible and sustainable transport systems. So for example, focusing on building roads that enable the ease of movement of public transport, as well as just the functionality within that city and that space. It's about the reduction of the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities, including paying special attention to air quality and municipal and other waste management. So what you also notice, and I think I noticed this, there was a time where I lived in Cambodia, and literally from landing at the airport and navigating the city, you could not help but notice the smell of the air, and a bulk of what was contributing to that was air pollution. So some of the things that need to be improved in order to create sustainable cities and communities is that we need to reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities. So the more people there are more cars and so forth, and we now need to find ways, and at times these are not done necessarily by us and individuals. There can be initiatives through government, but there are also opportunities where we can learn, firstly by educating ourselves of what can we do in terms of waste management, in terms of ensuring the better quality of air, as well as getting involved in our local municipalities to create a better environment. One would be education. Secondly, to also lead by example. So as active citizens, we are leaders in our homes, in our communities, and ultimately at the world at large. And how we conduct ourselves in spaces where are you a person who litters, for example? Are you a person who reuses plastic rather than just using it once and throwing it away? So certain things that are looking at creating sustainable environments are some of the things that we constantly need to keep in mind in order to ensure that we're leading and educating. Goal 12 speaks about responsible consumption and production. It's about promoting resource and energy efficiency, sustainable infrastructure, and providing access to basic services, green and decent jobs, and a better quality of life for all. It's about doing more and better with less. So responsible consumption and production is I think to sum it up would be to use the line that says using more, doing more and better with less. It's about identifying, and some of the things I've learned through this journey is industries such as the fashion industry, for example, have found ways to use, when producing cotton, or in ways that they work with one another, they've just introduced ways that they can produce more but using less material, or being even more cautious with how they use their resources. So as individuals, again, looking at ourselves, how do we make or contribute to making SDG 12 achievable? And some of the things that we can do is, for example, reducing food waste, and being just cautious about the things that we do in our corner, and for if some, for example, with food waste, it can then be used as compost, or contributing to biodegradables, or even being used in other forms to be recycled. So some of the things that we can bear in mind when we are considering the SDGs. SDG 13 is about climate action. And this is taking action to combat climate change and its impact. And to summarize what we can do, constantly we need to gauge that we are reusing things as much as possible rather than throwing them away after one use, as that has a direct impact on the environment and ultimately the climate. Ensuring that we reuse, we reduce the amount of waste, we reuse, be it plastic or whatever can be reused, and we even consciously recycle. So you'll find that in certain areas, like where I live, when we throw things away, there's actually different bins that say plastic, general waste, and paper. So that way, when the people that collect the garbage take it out, they know, okay, where there's only plastic goes into the plastic recycling, where there's only paper goes into paper recycling. And then ultimately it enables us to save the impact that this has on our environment and eventually the climate. Goal 14 is about life below water. And as we know, we all have a relationship and a direct impact on one another. So the aim of Goal 14 is to make us conscious that or to sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems from pollution, as well as address the impact of ocean acidification. So this goal is about conscientizing us about caring for life below land, because life below land has a direct impact on life on Earth. If we destroy our oceans, we prevent the natural form of life from continuing. So certain things that we need to be aware of are being, for example, when we go to the beach or when we are near rivers, constantly ensuring that we are conducting cleanups. It doesn't even need to be on World Cleanup Day. It can be just on a trip. I recently went on a trip to the coast, and we had an early morning snorkel. After snorkeling, then we just walked about near the beach and started collecting the litter, because you know that if it were to rain, all the papers or plastic that you may find close will go and suffocate the animals in the sea. So it's just about being, wherever you are, starting to be conscious of what action can I take so that tomorrow life on Earth and life below water is positively impacted. Goal 15, now looks at life on land. And this goal is about protecting, restoring, and promoting sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably managing forests, combating desertification, halting and reversing land degradation, as well as halting biodiversity loss. So it's about doing the things that enable that forests continue to grow. It's about enabling the natural way of life on land to continue. It's about conserving and restoring terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems. It's about ending deforestation and restoring degrading of degraded forests. And it's about combating global poaching and trafficking. So these are just some of the things that we can do to ensure that the safety of life on land. And life on land speaks to plants. It also speaks about the animals that live on land. And things that we can do is, I just know in South Africa with rhino poaching, there's initiatives that have started where people are donating to ensure that there is enough protection and security, particularly not only for rhinos, but also just the overall Big Five and all endangered animals. These initiatives are introduced to try and protect the planet from those that are destroying it. And these are some of the initiatives that we as active citizens can get involved in to play a part in saving life on land. SDG 16 then speaks about peace, justice, and strong institution. Now, particularly for us finding ourselves in a continent that is plagued with corruption from all forms, at times the police or the judicial system, this SDG is about taking responsibility. It's about the promotion of the rule of law at the national and international levels and ensuring that there is equal access to justice for all. By 2030, significantly reducing illicit financial and arms flows, strengthen the recovery and return of stolen assets, and combating all forms of organized crime. The essence of this SDG is to ensure that we are protecting the world's most vulnerable, be it women, children, men, or anyone that is most vulnerable and is at risk if there isn't proper justice and strong institutions and peace in the land that we live in. The action that we can take as active citizens is to embark on peaceful demonstrations, standing up against, for example, any issues in our communities that continue to prevail and do not encourage peace or justice that we feel strongly about. So it's about standing up. For example, in countries in South Africa, we've gone through seasons of and which continues, unfortunately, of gender-based violence, where the women then took to the streets and said enough is enough. These issues need to be addressed. Police need to step up, and you find that those actions have helped, because when you go and report a case today about gender-based violence, the action with which it's taken is far much more better than what it would have been 2 years ago. So there is a reward in taking action as active citizens to ensure that we are restoring confidence in our judicial systems, as well as ensuring that justice prevails and that we live in a more peaceful world. Lastly, we then have SDG 17. And SDG 17 is really the one that says, we can have all these SDGs, but if there is no partnership to enable the success of these goals, it will become difficult. No one person in their own corner can achieve this. It requires the action of everyone coming together. This particular SDG is a call for all countries to align policies. It is a vision for improved and more equitable trade. It's about coordination of investments, initiative to promote sustainable development across borders. And it requires partnership between the government, the private sector, as well as civil society. So for us to achieve the sustainable goals, and I like how they are often described as global goals, because it's not just about one person or about one organization or about one sector, but it is the responsibility of all people, all institutions, all private and public sector, as well as civil society, getting involved to ensure at their country level as well as at an international level there's a greater alignment and that we are achieving a more peaceful world. It is only through taking these actions that we can start seeing the difference that we are hoping for by the year 2030. Now, bringing it back to the journey of an active citizen, understanding who an active citizen is, what an active citizen does, and then taking into account the sustainable development goals, we can create a better world, because active citizens are people that take action to ensure that the world, or where they are, sometimes the action doesn't go as far as the world, sometimes it's just as far as your local community. Where you are, if you've taken the action, there is a greater chance that by 2030 your community and ultimately the world at large would be at a better place, where we see the end of poverty, we see a more prosperous and a more peaceful world. We will now watch a video that brings together the Sustainable Development Goals and also highlights just how, if we play our part as active citizens, we can create a different and better world, not only for ourselves, but also for the environment. Please enjoy. Part 3. Active Citizenship Framework. Now that we understand what it means to be an active citizen, and we've also looked at the Sustainable Development Goals and the potential work that we can do as active citizens, we will now look at a framework that will help us work on sustainable projects that have an impact that is long-lasting on our communities. This framework is called the JCI Active Citizen Framework. It was developed by the organization Junior Chamber International, and it is used worldwide to create sustainable projects in different communities. We will first start off at step 1. Step 1 looks at analyzing the community needs. So before you can ever work on a solution or perhaps giving a solution to a community, it is very important that you do the analysis. The needs analysis is not only about what you think, but it is about going into the community and finding out what is the true root cause of the problem that they are facing. Most times we will see the symptoms, but never the root cause. So for example, you might find yourself in a community that has a number of car accidents, maybe on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. Now, what we see is the accidents, but what we don't know is what is the reason why this particular community has so many accidents. It is only when we go into the community that we will start understanding what is the true root cause. And when we understand this, we will then be able to start formulating sustainable solutions. So when we are doing step 1, which is to analyze, it is important to constantly ask the why. So if we use the accident example, what we see is the accident. When we go into the community, we can then start asking. So we've seen that there's quite a number of accidents that happen within this area. What could be the possible cause? And we will get different answers. Some people might believe there are too many people that can't drive, or there are too many cars that pass a particular spot, so and there perhaps no traffic lights, so there's no one coordinating that particular spot. And perhaps after asking and investigating, we might actually realize not only are there no traffic lights, there are also no road markings. So there's no pedestrian walk that has been designated. There's no yield sign or stop sign that's been put up so that cars can coordinate themselves. So those are some of the reasons why that community might be finding itself with this problem. And the more we ask, we might even realize that perhaps there are other issues that contribute to that factor. Perhaps if we look at the time when the accidents happen, who are the people that are generally traveling at that time? And you might find the more we ask, the more enlightened we become, which then directs us to the next phase, which is the develop phase. The develop phase is about formulating sustainable solutions. So it's about uniting with stakeholders from all sectors of society, and projects are formulated to address the community's core needs and their root causes. Collaborators outline a project plan including goals, actions, and desired outcomes. Solution targets 3 integrated stages of community development that drive a community towards prosperity. So when we start looking and formulating our sustainable solutions, there are 3 areas of community development that need to be our target. So are we looking at health and wellness? Are we looking at education and economic empowerment? Or are we looking at peace, prosperity, and sustainability? Or are we looking at all three? If I go, for example, with the example of the accidents that we are looking at, when we get to this phase, we might then identify, so there are no road markings, which means the public sector would then need to get involved, because they would be responsible for ensuring road safety, and therefore they would need to come and do the different markings, as well as put in the traffic lights. So that is one stakeholder that needs to come on board when we look at these opportunities. What we may also learn is that there are quite a number of pedestrians that are crossing at that without being cautious or even looking out for the cars on the road. So there's an opportunity to then educate pedestrians regarding road signs. This can start off with getting involved with schools. It can also mean in going into community meetings and setting up those. So again, those are other stakeholders that would need to get involved. Perhaps there might even be for example, maybe functionality or issues with certain cars that their brakes don't work, and we had, maybe when we were doing the needs analysis, we actually realized that the accident is common when it's one model, car model that is driven. Then we start investigating and getting that particular company to look into the manufacturing of that vehicle, as it might have a direct impact on this community. So these are just some of the ideas that we would then need to start developing in order for us to find ourselves in a different place. We might need to even have signs or billboards on the road which speaks about road safety, and just educating, look left, look right, look left again before you cross the road. We can also get involved with media companies so that they can do adverts that can keep people alert. So those are some of the things that we consider in the development stage as ideas or as projects that can then be implemented in order for us to address the community need and the root cause. Once the development phase has been established and we can see that, okay, these are the steps that need to be taken, the next thing is for all of us to take action. So ideally, a project will need to be thoroughly managed. It means it needs to have timelines, it needs to have people allocated to do the different parts that they need to do, and also then we then move on to this stage, which is the execute, where we take action. Once the need and the root cause have been identified, active citizens take action by mobilizing resources, rallying support, and implementing the project plan. By combining resources, the community is enabled to achieve even greater sustainable impact. If we have done a thorough needs analysis that took us to the root cause, when we were developing and formulating our solutions, we would have identified the critical stakeholders that would enable us to execute successfully and have greater impact in the community. Once we have done that, we would then be able to execute successfully. Now, before I go on to the fourth phase of this framework, which would be to review and monitor, it is important to highlight the center of this whole engagement, which is engaging community stakeholders during each step, ensuring everyone takes ownership of the need and solution, resulting in sustainable impact. Now, in order for stage 1, 2, and 3 to be a success, it is important that there is partnership. So firstly, there needs to be trust that you gain with the community and the community members, because they would be the ones that inform you of the reality of what is going on in their community. So that is important that that is clarified. Secondly, when you identify stakeholders that would get involved, it is important that you get like-minded organizations to work with you, people that you trust and people that you know you can work with and they will deliver. This is important, as if the partnerships are not strong, it becomes difficult to execute successfully, as there will then be a gap in the chain that would enable the successful execution. So it is important that in the development phase, we identify who it is we're collaborating with, ensure we have their buy-in, ensure that it is a trusted partner who won't change the agenda of what it was that we were addressing initially for their own benefit, but rather someone who will collaborate for the success of the entire project. Lastly, we then look at phase 4, which is the review. Review speaks to monitoring and evaluating results. It is important to monitor progress throughout the project to determine if the goals and the intended impact are on track to be achieved. Finally, we analyze data to measure the resulting positive change. So, bearing in mind that every project has a time frame, if you're going to build a house, you would set a target of when you want to finish. Likewise, even in a community project, it is important when we're doing the development phase to understand what needs to be done, how long it will take us, and when do we anticipate to exit. It is important also that the aim of this framework is to enable us to create a project that will leave the community in a place where they are self-sufficient. It is not a successful, sustainable project if every year thereafter you are constantly still taking care of that community. We often speak about donations not being a sustainable project because they mean a recurring event. But here, when you have established what the core issues are, you educate and you empower so that when you take action, the community is left in a place where after a year, after 2, depending on what the project looks like, or after 5 years, is in a place where they can now survive without you holding their hand. This is where the monitor and evaluate comes in. So let's say we drafted in the development phase our project plan and saw that the successful implementation of this project would take us 2 years. After 6 months, we monitor the progress we're making, how many partners are on board, is everyone doing what they needed to do. A year in, we evaluate how far the progress is. 18 months in, we see where we are. And the last 6 months, we are now in the stage where we're preparing to exit. At the end of the 2 years, we then evaluate the success by looking and measuring the results that we would have obtained. This is known as the active citizenship framework, and that is the aim of every active citizen when we go into communities. It should be our goal that we leave the community sustainable rather than constantly holding their hands, because the reality is we also have finite resources, and at times if we do not create sustainable communities, it means we will continuously hold their hand and never leave them in a place where they are self-sufficient. So the goal of this active citizen framework is to enable us to create a better world and to create a more sustainable world. This framework works very well when we consider the sustainable goals, because not only are we aiming to achieve the sustainable goals by 2030, but it is the hope that by 2030 and beyond, the world is then in a better place. For any questions regarding the active citizenship framework, the JCI community is able to then assist us. I would like to stop at this point and allow you to look back on the work that you've done with other community projects, or perhaps look forward as you plan to work with different communities, that you do make consideration for the active citizenship framework. Fundamentally, ensure that the foundation is laid. Do a thorough needs analysis, because if we understand what the root problem is, all the other steps will certainly take us to a place where we create sustainable impact. I hope you've enjoyed this session as we got to understand what it means to be an active citizen and learning about the Sustainable Development Goals. Please do go out and educate more people about the Sustainable Development Goals and be a proactive, active citizen. Together, we can indeed ensure that we live in a better place where we see the end of poverty, and we live in a peaceful and a prosperous world by the year 2030. I'd like to take this opportunity and thank you for making the time to go through this course. I wish you the very best as you continue your journey as an active citizen. Wishing you sustainable impact and creating a better world for all. Thank you.